evening of December 20th, 1995, settled over Miami International Airport with the particular chaos unique to holiday travel. Among the hundreds of aircraft moving through the Florida night was a Boeing 757-223, registered N651 operating as American Airlines Flight 965. Its destination was Alfonso Bonilla Aragon International Airport in Cali, Colombia, a familiar route for the airline. The passengers streaming through the gate represented a microcosm of life, most notably families and individuals returning home to Colombia for Christmas celebrations. This is a story of air crash of American Airlines Flight 965. Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe now. Aviation. The mood was anticipatory, though frayed by delays. A winter storm in the northeastern United States had disrupted the entire system, and Flight 965 was running nearly 2 hours behind schedule. The man in command of the aircraft was Captain Nicholas Tafuri, a 57-year-old pilot with the weathered calm of a man who had spent more of his life in the air than on the ground. His logbook showed over 13,000 flight hours, more than 2,000 of them in the advanced Boeing 757 he had flown into Cali before and knew the terrain. Beside him in the right seat was First Officer Donnie Williams, 39 years old, a competent and well-regarded pilot with 9 years at the airline. While this was his first trip to Cali, his training and experience were unquestioned. In the cabin, the 8 flight attendants began their well-rehearsed safety dance, preparing the 155 passengers for the journey south. Among them were Gonzalo Dusan, his wife, and their 2 children, Michelle and a young son, their excitement for the homecoming trip palpable. Elsewhere, a university student named Mauricio Reyes settled into his seat, unaware of the role fate had chosen for him. The final pushback from the gate came at 5:14 p.m., but the congestion on the ground meant another long wait on the taxiways. The roar of the twin Rolls-Royce RB211 engines finally signified their takeoff at 6:35 p.m. as the aircraft climbed into the darkening sky. Turning south over the endless black expanse of the Caribbean, the initial phase of the flight was utterly routine. The sophisticated Flight Management System, or FMS, a computer that could automate navigation with stunning precision, guided them along their programmed route. For nearly 3 hours, the hum of the jets was a constant, soothing companion to the passengers, many of whom dozed or watched a movie, the delay already fading from memory. The first hint of a change in routine came as they began their descent toward the Colombian landmass. The crew made contact with Cali Approach Control around 9:20 p.m. The controller, Nelson Rivera, recognized the flight and, in an effort to be helpful, offered them a shortcut. The original flight plan had them entering a holding pattern and making a long, looping approach from the south to land on runway 1. Rivera's new plan was more direct. He suggested they fly straight to the Cali, VO our radio beacon, and land on the opposite direction runway 19, which would save them considerable time. Eager to recoup some of their lost schedule, the crew accepted without hesitation. This decision, made with the best of intentions, set in motion a chain of events from which there would be no recovery. It instantly increased the cockpit workload from a managed descent to a frantic recalculation. The pilots now had to pull out new approach charts, reprogram the complex FMS computer, reconfigure the aircraft, and manage communications, all while monitoring their descent into mountainous terrain. In his haste to execute the new instructions, Captain Tafuri began clearing the old, pre-programmed navigation points from the FMS. He believed the controller had cleared them direct to Cali, And in doing so, he deleted crucial waypoints, including Tuluá and Rosso, which were the navigational signposts the controller would use to guide them. Unbeknownst to the crew, they had just erased their own roadmap. This error was compounded by a critical deficiency on the ground. 3 years earlier, Colombian rebel forces had attacked the Cali airport and destroyed its primary radar system. It had never been replaced. Controller Nelson Rivera was working blind. His screen showed no blip representing Flight 965, no altitude readout, no ground speed. His entire mental picture of the aircraft's position was built from the pilot's verbal reports over the crackling radio. He had no way of knowing that the crew had just deleted the very waypoints he was using to vector them. Confusion began to mount. The controller asked the crew to report passing the Tuluá beacon, but they had already flown past it, a fact they only realized upon checking their charts. Trying to recover the situation, they decided to proceed directly to the final approach fix, the Rosso navigational beacon. On the paper approach chart in Captain Tafuri's hands, the identifier for the Rosso beacon was printed as a single letter, R. He turned to the FMS keyboard, a device similar to an early 1990s computer keyboard, and typed R. The system responded by displaying a list of all the nearby navigational fixes whose identifiers began with that letter. The list contained 12 options. In a fatal twist of logic, the FMS did not sort this list alphabetically. Instead, it prioritized the beacon closest to the aircraft's current position. On this night, the first R on the list was Romeo, a beacon located near Bogota, over 130 miles to the northeast of their position. The correct beacon, Rosso, was several entries down. Pressed for time, his attention fractured by multiple competing tasks. Captain Tafuri saw the first R on the list, assumed it was correct, and pressed the execute button. The Boeing 757, an obedient and sophisticated machine, accepted the command without question. It immediately banked sharply to the left, turning away from the safe, wide valley and pointing its nose directly toward the towering wall of the Andes Mountains. For a full minute, the aircraft flew eastward into increasingly rugged terrain. The pilots, their heads down studying charts and managing the descent, did not immediately notice the dramatic change on their navigation display. The first officer was the one who broke the spell. Peering at the screen, he saw their trajectory was now taking them into a box canyon, surrounded on 3 sides by rising peaks. His question, captured forever on the cockpit voice recorder, was laced with dawning horror. Where are we? Hey, where are we going? Realization struck the cockpit with the force of a physical blow. Captain Tafuri took manual control, disconnecting the autopilot and shouting, "Give me a right turn, now." He wrenched the control yoke to the right, commanding a steep bank away from the mountain. But they were already in a race they were destined to lose. The terrain was rising faster than they could climb. Earlier, in their efforts to lose altitude quickly for the new approach, they had deployed the spoilers panels on the wings that rise up to kill lift and increase the rate of descent. In the frantic activity of the missed approach and the emergency turn, a catastrophic detail was overlooked. The spoilers were still deployed. At 9:41 p.m., the silence of the cockpit was shattered by the loud, robotic, and terrifyingly urgent voice of the ground proximity warning system. "Pull up, pull up, pull up," it commanded. The pilots reacted with pure instinct, slamming the throttles forward to their maximum power setting and hauling back on the control column with all their strength. The engines screamed, spooling up from their idle state. The nose of the 757 pitched sharply upward, but the extended spoilers were still dumping critical lift from the wings. The aircraft struggled to climb, its performance crippled, its fate sealed by a simple, forgotten switch. The cockpit voice recorder captured the final, desperate seconds, the roar of the engines, the frantic shouts of up, and pull up, and then the violent, rattling shudder of the stick shaker, a warning that the wings were stalling. At 9 hours, 41 minutes and 28 seconds p.m., American Airlines Flight 965, still in a shallow, struggling climb, struck the trees on the eastern slope of Mount El Diluvio at 8,900 feet above sea level. It sheared through the dense forest, its fuselage tearing apart, and finally came to rest on the mountain's western side. Just 100 feet below the summit, the violence of the impact was not the end of the story. In the cold, dark silence of the Andean night, a new struggle began. The wreckage was scattered across a remote, roadless mountainside near the town of Buga. Of the 163 people on board, a handful had survived the initial crash. Mauricio Reyes, the student, found himself injured but mobile. He heard the cries of another survivor, a woman named Mercedes Ramirez, and worked to free her from the twisted metal. Gonzalo Dusan, miraculously alive, began a frantic search for his family in the pitch black. He found his daughter, Michelle, trapped by her legs in the shattered fuselage. His young son was nearby, critically injured and stranded in a tree. For hours, these few survivors huddled together, battling shock, their injuries, and the penetrating cold, their hopes pinned on a rescue that seemed impossibly distant. The rescue effort was a monumental challenge. The crash site was located in dense jungle, and the search helicopters, lacking night vision technology, were grounded until dawn. When the first Colombian Air Force choppers spotted the debris field in the morning light, they saw survivors waving weakly. The rescue that followed was a feat of courage and endurance. Medics were lowered into the jungle to triage the wounded. Michelle Dusan had to be carried down the mountain on a makeshift stretcher for hours over treacherous terrain before she could be safely airlifted to a hospital. In the end, only 4 passengers survived the crash in the long, brutal night: Gonzalo Dusan, his daughter Michelle, Mauricio Reyes, and Mercedes Ramirez. The final death toll reached 159, as Gonzalo's son and 3 other initial survivors succumbed to their injuries. In a strange, sad footnote, a small dog being transported in the cargo hold was found alive amid the devastation, a tiny miracle adopted by rescue workers who named him Milagro. The investigation that followed, led by the Colombian Civil Aviation Authority with help from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, pieced together the tragedy from the wreckage of the FMS and the haunting audio of the cockpit voice recorder. The final report did not point to a single villain, but to a cascade of failures. The primary cause was a breakdown in crew resource management. The pilots became task-saturated, failed to cross-verify their navigation, and lost their situational awareness. The failure to retract the spoilers during the escape maneuver was a critical final error. Analysis showed that with clean wings, the aircraft would have likely cleared the mountain. The confusing duplication of the R identifier and the FMS's sorting logic created a fatal trap. The crew's unconscious pressure to make up time led them to rush a critical procedure, and the absence of radar at Cali Airport meant the controller was powerless to see their fatal turn and correct them. The legacy of Flight 965 is etched not in stone, but in procedure, technology, and training. The accident spurred a renewed global emphasis on crew resource management, drilling into pilots the importance of communication, verification, and managing workload. The sterile cockpit rule, minimizing non-essential talk during critical phases, was reinforced. The industry accelerated the adoption of enhanced ground proximity warning systems, which used digital terrain maps to provide much earlier warnings. The navigation beacon at the heart of the confusion had its identifier changed. The story of American Airlines Flight 965 serves as a permanent, sobering lesson in the delicate balance between human judgment and sophisticated technology. A reminder that safety is built not on the absence of error, but on layers of defense designed to catch those errors before they become catastrophic. Thank you for watching this complete video. Please like and subscribe our YouTube channel, Red Dot Aviation.